At sunrise, the rancher stops in shock as a giant warrior limps into his field, dragging one injured leg through the dust, each breath sounding like a fading battle drum. Yet his eyes hold a silent storm of pain and secrets. The rancher feels an unexpected pull of compassion even as every warning he ever heard whispers in his mind. But still he steps forward and offers the warrior his strongest horse, a gesture so simple yet so dangerous that the quiet village immediately stiffens with fear, convinced that this act of kindness will bring ruin. The villagers watch from behind fences and half-closed doors, whispering that no wounded giant ever arrives without a dark story behind him, and the rancher senses that this moment will change everything. He doesn't know if he has saved a life or invited his own destruction, but the warrior's trembling hands say more than words ever could. The rancher begins his morning like any other, brushing dust from his sleeves and stepping into the quiet light of dawn. But his routine shatters the moment he notices a massive shadow moving across the far edge of his land, a slow, heavy figure limping toward his barn with the exhausted weight of someone who has walked through storms no one else could survive. He narrows his eyes, unsure if he should run or call for help, but as the figure steps closer, he realizes it is a giant warrior, taller than any man he has ever seen, armor cracked, breath sharp, and eyes filled with a pain deeper than wounds alone. Something in the warrior's broken stride makes the rancher's heart tighten with fear and sympathy at the same time, and he feels the strange certainty that this unexpected visitor carries a story dangerous enough to change his entire life before the sun fully rises. The rancher stands frozen as the giant warrior stops only a few steps away, saying nothing, his silence louder than a cry for help. And in that silence, the rancher notices how the warrior's chest rises unevenly, how his shoulders tremble with exhaustion, how his gaze avoids the rising sun as if he no longer feels worthy of its warmth. And the rancher senses that this enormous man who once carried the weight of battles now carries something far heavier, something that presses into his spirit, rather than his skin. The warrior tries to straighten his posture, but his injured leg gives out for a moment, and he steadies himself on a cracked spear that looks as though it has survived more suffering than steel should endure. And when he finally lifts his eyes, the rancher sees a mixture of defeat and shame, the look of someone who has lost more than a fight. Without a word, the warrior gestures toward the distant horizon, where a faint trail of dust shows the place where his horse collapsed miles back, and the rancher understands instantly that the warrior has walked the rest of the journey alone, pushing through pain that would have broken most men long before he reached the barn. The rancher steps closer despite every warning echoing inside him, and as the wind shifts, he notices old scars across the warrior's arms, marks that tell stories of loyalty, sacrifice, and battles fought without hesitation. And something inside him softens, knowing that whatever brought the warrior here was not greed or cruelty, but a deep, unspoken need for survival. The warrior tries to speak, but his voice cracks before a single word escapes, and instead he lowers his head in a silent plea, a gesture so vulnerable that the rancher feels a wave of unexpected protectiveness rise within him, stronger than fear, stronger than caution, just pure human instinct. The rancher reaches out slowly, placing a steady hand on the warrior's arm, feeling the heat of fever beneath battered armor. And in that moment, he realizes that turning this man away might cost him his life, and the rancher cannot bring himself to let that happen, not when kindness is all he has to offer. The quiet field around them seems to hold its breath as the rancher guides the warrior toward the barn, feeling the ground shake softly under the giant's weight. And though the rancher's heart races, he refuses to step back, understanding that sometimes destiny arrives without warning, limping, wounded, and carrying truths too heavy to speak. The warrior follows with slow precision, each step revealing the extent of his suffering. Yet within his silence there is a strange sense of trust forming, a fragile bond built not through words but through the simple act of being seen. The rancher finally leads him to a shaded corner of the barn where he can rest, and as the warrior lowers himself onto a wooden bench that creaks under his massive frame, he lifts his eyes again, no longer avoiding the rancher's gaze. And in that moment, the rancher feels an unexplainable certainty that this encounter is not a burden placed upon him, but a turning point that will reshape everything he believes about danger, kindness, and the unexpected paths that arrive when least expected. The warrior sits in the shaded corner of the barn, his breath still uneven, his wounds deep, yet his eyes fixed on the rancher with a quiet patience that feels both grateful and uncertain. And as the rancher studies him, he senses that this man has never asked for help in his life, which makes his silent desperation even heavier. The rancher wipes his palms on his trousers, feeling the weight of a decision forming inside him, a decision that defies logic but feels undeniably right. And without giving himself time to reconsider, he steps toward the back stall where his strongest horse, Midnight, waits with calm dark eyes. The moment the rancher begins untying the rope, he feels dozens of unseen eyes watching from across the fields, villagers hidden behind fences and doorways, their whispers sliding through the morning air like cold warnings, insisting that offering anything to a roaming giant warrior is foolish, reckless, and dangerous for them all. The rancher hears those whispers but refuses to let fear guide his heart, sensing that the warrior's suffering carries no threat, only a heavy past that no longer fits the violence others expect. So he leads Midnight forward with a firm grip and a steady breath, letting the giant see the sincerity in every quiet movement. The warrior reacts with surprise, his brows lifting slightly as if he cannot believe that a simple rancher would trust him with such a powerful animal. And when the rancher places the reins into his massive hand, something fragile softens in the warrior's expression, a hint of respect blooming from deep inside his war-weary spirit. Villagers whisper louder now, some gasping, others predicting ruin. Yet the rancher ignores all of it, focusing only on the truth he sees in the warrior's tired eyes, knowing that kindness given to the right person becomes stronger than any weapon. The warrior attempts to stand, but his injured leg trembles again, and the rancher moves quickly to support him, feeling the incredible weight of a man built for battles leaning gently on someone who has never touched a battlefield. And this quiet exchange binds them in a way neither expected. When the warrior finally lifts himself onto Midnight's back, the horse remains steady, sensing the pain but accepting the burden with quiet loyalty, and the rancher steps away slowly, understanding that this moment will be remembered long after the dust settles. A long breath escapes the warrior as he looks down at the rancher, and though he says nothing, his silence carries a promise, something unspoken yet powerful, like a vow forming behind tired eyes. The villagers begin stepping back, fearful of what happens next, but the rancher stands still, unwavering, knowing that once a decision is made with the heart, no amount of fear can undo it. The warrior grips the reins firmly, lifts his cracked spear with renewed strength, and prepares to ride, the rising sun painting his armor with gold, as though marking the beginning of a debt he intends to repay in a way the rancher could never imagine. The warrior settles into the saddle with visible effort, gripping the reins as Midnight adjusts to the immense weight, and for a brief moment the rancher believes the giant will simply ride away without a word. But then the warrior leans down, placing a heavy hand on the rancher's shoulder, his touch steady despite his exhaustion, and the warmth of that grip feels like a silent exchange of secrets neither man fully understands. The rancher looks up, meeting eyes that no longer appear defeated but strangely awakened, as if the simple act of receiving kindness has reignited something buried deep within the warrior's spirit. And before the rancher can speak, the giant lowers his voice to a dark, steady whisper that seems to echo against the quiet fields around them. "Your kindness will be returned at sunrise, when you least expect it," he says, and the words carry a weight that settles into the rancher's chest like a stone dropped into still water, creating ripples of confusion, fear, and curiosity all at once. The villagers who have been watching from hidden corners freeze at that sentence, exchanging anxious glances as if the warrior has spoken a prophecy rather than gratitude, and the rancher feels their silent pressure urging him to step back, to question what he may have invited into his life. Yet he stands firm, sensing that the warrior's promise is not a threat, but something far more complex. The warrior lifts his gaze toward the horizon, where the first layers of sunlight begin to unfold across the fields, and for a fleeting second his hardened features soften, revealing a glimpse of sorrow that makes the rancher understand this man carries burdens heavier than any treasure or weapon could ever be. Midnight shifts under him, signaling readiness, and the warrior straightens his back with new determination, gripping his cracked spear as if holding onto the final piece of a past he is not yet ready to let go of. The rancher opens his mouth to ask what sunrise will bring, but the warrior pulls the reins gently, guiding Midnight into a slow, powerful stride that sends dust swirling around them. And the rancher watches him leave, the air humming with a sense of destiny, moving quietly across the land. Villagers retreat into their homes with uneasy whispers, some convinced that a hidden danger now hangs over the ranch, others insisting the warrior's words will bring misfortune, yet none of them can shake the haunting mystery behind that promise. The rancher remains alone in the field long after the warrior disappears beyond the hills, feeling the echo of that cryptic vow pulse through the morning air, and though he cannot explain why, he senses that whatever awaits at sunrise will not come as a blessing or a curse, but as a truth capable of reshaping everything he knows about loyalty, fate, and the unseen ties that form when one human soul chooses to lift another from the edge of ruin. The rancher watches the last trace of dust fade into the distance, yet the warrior's mysterious promise continues to echo inside him long after the fields fall silent. And as the sun slips behind the hills, the village slowly comes alive with anxious murmurs that drift toward his home like restless shadows refusing to settle. Neighbors approach his porch with lanterns trembling in their hands, their voices low and urgent, warning him that offering anything to a wandering giant was a dangerous act that no wise man would ever attempt, and each warning grows darker as the night deepens. Some insist the warrior will return with an army, sweeping through the valley to claim the land that kindness has opened to him, while others whisper that the rancher has unknowingly invited a thief who will slip back under the protection of darkness to take whatever he desires, leaving ruin in his wake. The rancher listens silently, trying to keep his breath steady even as doubt pushes against the small flicker of trust he had felt earlier. And though he wants to believe he read the warrior's eyes correctly, the fear spreading through the village begins tightening around him like a heavy coil. When the villagers finally retreat to their homes, the rancher remains on his porch alone, staring at the quiet fields now swallowed by moonlight, hearing nothing but the distant rustle of wind brushing against dry grass. And the stillness only makes the warrior's promise feel even more unsettling. He returns inside, yet cannot bring himself to sleep, pacing across the wooden floorboards, replaying every detail he noticed in the warrior's face, the exhaustion, the shame, the gratitude, the sorrow, searching for any sign that could reveal what sunrise might bring. The hours stretch slowly, each minute heavy with uncertainty, and every creak in the barn makes him glance up, half expecting the giant to return early, half fearing that the villagers' predictions might prove true. Yet beneath all the uncertainty, something deeper begins to stir within him, a quiet realization that fear alone cannot define the meaning of what happened, because a man who intended harm would not have shown such humility in silence, nor carried such visible exhaustion that spoke of battles fought far from greed. The rancher sits by the window, watching the moon drift across the sky, and though he tries to rest his eyes, sleep refuses to come, leaving him trapped between pride for offering help and dread that he may have placed everyone in danger. Every breath feels heavier as the night thins toward dawn, and the rancher wonders if sunrise will reveal gratitude, betrayal, or something he cannot yet imagine. But no matter what awaits, he knows he must face it alone, without fear guiding his choices, because once a promise has been spoken under the first light of morning, destiny tends to honor it in ways no man can predict. The rancher sits by the window as the final hours of night fade, his eyes burning from sleepless worry. And just when he begins to think the warrior's promise may have been nothing more than a riddle tossed into the wind, a distant tremor runs through the earth, soft yet unmistakable, like the slow approach of something powerful. He steps outside, gripping the railing to steady himself, and as the first beam of sunrise breaks across the fields, a tall shadow emerges over the ridge, moving with a calm, steady rhythm that sends a chill through the rancher's chest, not from fear, but from the realization that the giant has returned. Midnight walks beside the warrior without hesitation, and the difference in the man atop the horse is striking. He no longer limps, no longer carries exhaustion in his shoulders, no longer struggles to breathe, and instead he rides with the presence of someone who has reclaimed a strength hidden beneath days of suffering. When he stops before the rancher, The warrior dismounts gracefully, offering a quiet nod that carries a depth far beyond words. And the rancher feels the weight of dawn settle around them as the giant steps forward with an expression sharpened by clarity rather than pain. The villagers peek from their windows, bracing themselves for whatever truth might unfold. But the warrior lifts a single hand, commanding the air with an authority that silences even the wind, and he walks toward the barn as though approaching a sacred doorway. The rancher follows, confused yet unable to ignore the pull of whatever is about to be revealed. And when the warrior places his palm against the wooden entrance, a faint golden shimmer pulses through the boards, spreading like veins of light weaving themselves into a locked pattern. The rancher gasps, unable to believe his eyes, and the warrior turns to him with a calm voice that carries the certainty of someone unveiling a long-hidden truth. He explains that the barn has been sealed with an ancient protection, a spell used only by guardians of a treasure so old that most believe it to be legend, and that during the night he returned with the last portion of that treasure to bind it to a place untouched by greed. The rancher listens in stunned silence as the warrior reveals that he has served for years as a guardian of gold meant for the deserving. But his wounds had grown too deep, his journey too long, and he believed he would die before finding a soul worthy enough to receive what he protected. The warrior then steps closer, his voice softening as he declares that the rancher's kindness, given without fear, without hesitation, without seeking anything in return, proved him worthy in a way no test of strength or battle ever could. The barn now holds gold beyond measure, but only the rancher can open it, for the magic responds solely to the one who offered compassion when all others offered doubt. And as the sun climbs higher, painting the world in gold, the rancher realizes his simple act of humanity has transformed his entire life into something far greater than he ever imagined. The warrior slowly sinks to one knee, lowering his head with a reverence that steals the rancher's breath. And in that sacred stillness, he declares that in his homeland, any life saved is bound by an eternal debt of honor, a vow unbroken across generations. The rancher stands speechless as the meaning settles inside him, realizing that his simple kindness has rewritten his entire destiny, lifting him from a quiet poor man with a small barn to the chosen guardian of a treasure protected by a giant whose loyalty now runs deeper than blood. The morning light sharpens around them like a blessing, and the warrior's voice grows steady as he pledges to defend the rancher's land, legacy, and life for as long as the sun continues to rise. In that moment, the rancher understands that true wealth is not the gold sealed behind enchanted wood, but the honor of a bond forged in trust, courage, and a sunrise that changed everything.